Welcome to Café of Delights, conversations that enlighten and inspire with me, your host, Gale West. We are at the precipice of one of the most exciting evolutions in human history, from science to spirituality, culture, arts, cutting-edge psychotherapies, new economies, and more. We will explore how to create a world where all can thrive. In a series of riveting interviews, you'll have the opportunity to hear from those that are actively working at the edges of local, regional, and global transformation. Join me, your host and author of the book, Money Come Dance With Me, Gale West, to be inspired, delighted, and filled with hope for a new reality. Café of Delights starts now. Hello, and welcome to the Café of Delights. I am here in Los Gatos, sunny California, and I have with me, I'm so happy to have my guest, Dr. Megan Wagner. She's a therapist, spiritual guide, visionary artist, ritual leader, interfaith minister, and author of 8 books on spiritual healing. Megan is director of the Tree of Life Wisdom School, director of spiritual psychology at the Chaplaincy Institute, and teacher at the Nine Gates Mystery School. She offers training programs in spiritual psychology, Tree of Life, divine feminine initiation, and ritual leadership. Megan has been on a spiritual path for 50 plus years, exploring mystical and shamanic traditions, initiations, and rites of passage. In her healing work, she combines depth psychology, Kabbalah, astrology, and alchemy with the sacred arts of drumming, chanting, storytelling, psychodrama, and ritual. Megan creates podcasts, meditations, sacred music, and shamanic robes for personal and planetary healing. Welcome, Megan. So happy to have you.
Thank you so much, Gale. Glad to be here.
So I ask everyone the same question. What brings you hope at this time, and what delights your soul? Since this is a Café of Delights.
What brings me hope? That is a great question. You know, what brings me great hope is being with other spiritual seekers who are on the same path, where we can share joy and travel and fun and, amidst all that is going on in life that feels maybe unhopeful to people. What brings me hope is sharing and resonating with deeply soulful people. I love that.
And delight?
What brings me delight? I have to say that one of the things that brings me delight is traveling to sacred places. I absolutely love traveling, and I love traveling with groups of people to bring them to sacred spaces and to share the awakening that is happening on the planet. So that brings me a lot of delight.
Yeah, and I understand you're going to be going shortly to Thailand, right?
I am, next week.
How exciting. We'll talk about that in the show. So, we just read about your origin story, which is pretty big. Is there anything you want to add to how you got to where you are? And 50 plus years is a long time to be doing.
It is.
You don't look that old.
I know. Well, it's because I
started at 2.
Well, I had my first spiritual awakening at 12, and it was very powerful because I grew up in a Jewish home. It was kind of mixed Jewish Christian, and so I've been spending my whole life moving back and forth between those two traditions. And when I was 12 years old, I had a very powerful awakening on the inner planes. And my heart opened to love and to transpersonal pathway. And so it started me on a spiritual journey. And I went to, the Jewish tradition, then I went to the Christian tradition, and really couldn't find answers that I was really deeply seeking. Mm-hmm. And even though those were nourishing traditions, what really started to nourish me was to find the mystical river underlying both of those traditions. So when I found my Kabbalah teacher in London, I moved from California to London. And that really started to speak to my soul, because I came into a mystical school. And for me, I finally got some answers to my deep questions, my deep hunger about how to awaken fully, both physically, psychologically, and spiritually. Mm-hmm. And so for me, I came into this Tree of Life tradition, and it spoke to my soul from a mystical perspective. And I had been having a series of visions and a series of shamanic experiences that really were difficult, and I'm sure many of us on the spiritual path have had dark nights of the soul or difficult times. And so basically, as I was training to be a therapist, came into this Kabbalah school, my whole life just came apart for about 15 years.
Wow.
And I understand now that that was a shamanic dismemberment in order to remember myself on a much deeper, more soulful spiritual level. So, it's been a long road for me, but after that dismemberment and then coming back together experience, I really understood the whole shamanic path, the initiation journey, and that's what I've dedicated my life to, is really helping other people on this journey of awakening.
So many people have the dismemberment, but we don't call it that.
Right.
We call it, my life is going to hell.
Right.
I don't know what to do, and I'm frustrated, and everything I do doesn't work, and all the other kind of things. Yeah.
Yeah.
And to be able to look back and say, oh, there was a purpose for it is really helpful. Anytime we can find meaning in our experience, it makes a difference.
Well, especially in these times when everything feels so chaotic and so breaking down, if we can really remember to keep our eyes on what spiritual union feels like instead of the coming apart. And the reason things come apart for people or they go through a dark night is because the traditional conditioning of our culture really doesn't hold people in a sacred container to awaken to their higher self. So there is absolutely a purpose to the dismemberment. It's just we need to remember what the purpose is for spiritual coming back together so that we can emerge in a much more shining, soulful, unified form.
Well, that brings me, so that's the individual. And, we all go through that, especially those who are seekers.
Mm-hmm.
But, we talked about what's happening today with the collective. And I know that you have an incredible background in so many things. I've had the experience of working with you, which has been amazing. And astrologically, you have a really interesting perspective on what's happening in the world. And I know we talk about the Age of Aquarius, and back in the 60s, we're singing the song of the Age of Aquarius. It doesn't seem like it's happening. What is going on right now as far as your perception?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So collectively, we have been shifting from the Piscean age into the Aquarian age, and now we're fully in the Aquarian age. And the Piscean age myth was very similar to what we learned about in Christianity, which is the death and resurrection of the god. And unfortunately, what happened, I think, is it really got externalized so that we were living this myth of someone else, like a savior dying and being reborn in order to save us. But that's not at all what the myth means. The Piscean age was about internalizing the fact that we can die to be reborn to our higher self. And now we're shifting into the Aquarian age, which is about all those souls that have resurrected themselves to their higher self can now meet around the Aquarian table. And the Aquarian table is everybody having an equal voice. We're no longer going to be in this hierarchical paradigm. We're in a paradigm of everyone being equal around the table and everyone having a voice. Aquarius is very much around diversity and unity. And what I love about the Aquarian age now is that people's voices are being heard in a cooperative, collaborative kind of way. And that's where we're moving. The other side of Aquarius is also technology. Now, we know that there are positive things about that, and there are also negative things about technology, the transhumanist agenda or the technology that takes over the organic human. Whereas what it's really supposed to mean is that using technology for higher awareness, higher consciousness, connecting on the web of life. So we have a lot to look forward to in terms of the hierarchy changing and shifting to a more collaborative society. But the other thing I'll mention is that astrologically, the planet Pluto has now just recently, in the last couple months, gone into Aquarius. And so we've got the help now for the next 20 years of the planet Pluto, god of death and rebirth, moving into the sign of Aquarius. So it's going to feel very tumultuous because wherever Pluto is, there's a lot of death and chaos and rebirth to a higher level of evolution. So if we can keep our mind and our sights on the higher evolution that is coming, that we are creating, it really makes a big difference as we're navigating through the chaos.
Mm-hmm. This is going to go on for 20 years.
Well, Pluto in Aquarius is going on for 20 years, but it is what is ushering us into understanding the Aquarian age. So we're just going to have to go through the paradigm shifting. And there are a lot of ways that we can make it easier to navigate through the shifting. One of them is to really up our spiritual practices right now. I tell this to all my clients, all my students. This is the time we were all born for, the chaos before the next coherent level of evolution. So really sticking to your spiritual practices or psycho-spiritual practices is really important right now.
Well, we talk about Aquarius in kind of general terms, but what exactly is the Age of Aquarius? Other than we're all going to be at the table, and not one's going to be better than the other. Like, what to look forward to. My thing is we have to have hope in this time, which is a lot of chaos.
Well, remember that chaos is one coin. The other side of that coin is coherence. And so if we're only looking at chaos and we forget that coherence is on the other side, then we lose sight and we get caught in the chaos.
Right.
If we can remember that chaos always accompanies the next level of initiation or the next level of evolution. Mm-hmm. And this is kind of the theme of dismemberment that we were talking about. So if people are going through a feeling of internal chaos, dismemberment, like, you know what, my belief systems don't work anymore, or the paradigms that I've lived by don't work anymore, that's okay. But we've got to hold each other in the chaos while we figure out what is the new thing we are creating together. And that's what I always encourage people to set their third eye, set their co-creative attention on what we desire to create that is more coherent. So what we're looking for is the old structures falling, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. Educational institutions, religious institutions, financial institutions, medical institutions. It's okay that they're crumbling. They need to. And I always think of it as, like, think of a building of bricks that starts to shake and come apart. And what we're left with is just a bunch of bricks. And it looks bad, but the positive of that is that then we take the bricks and we create new structures that are more functional for this new era.
Mm-hmm. So part of it, when we talk about coming together mm-hmm. as a collective, my passion is about how do we heal trauma in the collective to create a world where all can thrive. Sure. And I think what we're talking about is recognizing that we're the shadow of the human race is kind of coming into our face. We're having to deal with it.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I believe the reason the collective shadow is coming up is because we actually have more access to divine mother love, to coherent energies, to what I call the sacred marriage energies that are much more able to come onto the earth right now. Mm. So you have to contrast that with when more light is available, more light is shown on the shadow aspects. And so that is why we're seeing so much violence, shadowy emotions, really low-level, low-resonance human behavior that looks scary, it looks destructive, and it is. It's part of the shadow that's coming up to be cleared. So those of us who know how to clear collective trauma, it's really important that, again, we do our spiritual practices and that we ask for help from spirit to clear this trauma, both personally and collectively.
Right. So that's a good point. We don't have to do this by ourselves.
No, we do not.
And so can you share how you call on spirit? I know how I call on spirit, but for a lot of people, they go, well, I don't know how to call on my guys. I don't, we think we have to do it all by ourselves. That's kind of the American way.
It is.
Pull yourself up by your bootstraps, as opposed to recognizing that we can't do this alone.
Yeah, everyone has different ways of connecting with their higher self and then connecting with their guides.
Mm-hmm.
I do encourage everyone who's listening to find a practice that works for them. I do several different things. I study the Tree of Life in Kabbalah, so I always do my Tree of Life breathing up my spine, and I create a circle of protection around me every single day. And then I go straight up into the stars. I call down my higher self, and I call on my higher guides.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a visual person, so I see light beings around the earth, and I just say, light beings around the earth, send whatever healing energy you have to the places that need it right now. Mm-hmm. But I also do a lot of shamanic practices. So I do a lot of drumming and a lot of ritual. And that has helped me more than anything, is to gather people together to do communal ritual to clear ancestral trauma, collective trauma. And what I like about instruments like drumming, rattling, using sound or sound bowls or gongs, is that oftentimes when we're using shamanic instrumentation or drumming, it can both break apart traumatic energy and dissipate it into the ethers. And it can help us to release emotions that are within the body. Mm-hmm. So I do a lot of grief rituals with drumming and singing and moving, and really utilizing voice, movement, and sound and drumming to help people release trauma out of their bodies.
And sound is one of the most powerful access points to so many things.
It is, especially for trauma. I have found that when people can use their voice to release grief and trauma from the body, it is tremendously healing and helpful.
Well, we're going to take a little break. And when we come back, I'd like to kind of go more into how we can individually kind of create some sort of rituals for ourselves and call things in. Because I know that that's one of the things that you specialize in, working with ritual. Yeah. And how to create some daily rituals that support people. And I know it's all individual, and you have to find what works for you, but having some ideas of how to work with that would be great. Great. So we will be back in a moment, and I'm Gale West on the Café of Delights, and I have with me my guest, Megan Wagner. Hello, and we're back on the Café of Delights. I'm your host, Gale West, and I have with me Reverend Dr. Megan Wagner. And we've been talking about the Aquarian age and what's happening in the world, and also how to navigate that personally. So I'd like for you to really give us some tips and ideas of how to navigate these times individually that are going to support us and the world as we shift into from the Piscean age to the Aquarian age.
Yeah, it's a great question. So as a psychotherapist, I'm working day in and day out, giving people some basic navigational tools with how to navigate through shedding one's own personal trauma. Also, when we're up against this collective trauma, like how to navigate through that time. And I like to think about the human being having three main navigational tools. The first one is understanding our inner child, because if you think about the analogy of every person being the captain of their own ship of the soul, the captain is the adult self. And on the ship of our soul, we have our inner child, we've got our captain on the wheel, and then we have a higher self. Of course, we have many more subpersonalities, but I just want to talk about these three navigational tools. So the inner child is one navigational tool. The second is the captain, who's the adult self. And the third is our higher self. And those are three very different placements in the body as well. So the inner child, I always think of in our first two chakras.
Mm-hmm.
The captain, I think about in the third and fourth chakras. So really the power center and the heart center. And then the higher self in the upper centers, which would be our third eye and crown.
Mm-hmm.
And these are three different places that we can come from in our own being. And the reason I mentioned the inner child is because for many people navigating through these chaotic times, I find that their inner child has grabbed the wheel of their ship. And when the inner child is behind the wheel of a person's ship, the ship can be turning in circles and the ship's not really going where they want it to go.
Right.
That's typically because a lot of us have trauma that we haven't healed and cleared at the inner child level. And so it is worth doing some kind, compassionate, loving healing techniques and healing for our inner child, because our inner child needs and deserves to be healed.
Mm-hmm.
And when our inner child is healed, it can contribute an enormous amount of joy and play and creativity to our journey through life. So I say to people, definitely heal your inner child and get your inner child so that she or he feels very safe inside, with a good mother in there, good father, good parent, so that the inner child can help you navigate well through the life by bringing joy and play and creativity. The main navigational tool is really from the captain of your ship. This is your adult self. And so for most people, we want the emotional adult self behind the wheel of their ship. And this is a wonderful way to navigate through life, because that is your adult decision maker.
Mm.
And you can make much more rational, objective decisions when you're the captain rather than the inner child. Because when the inner child has the wheel, it's very subjective, and we're really not oriented in reality when the wounded child has the wheel.
Mm-hmm.
So the best navigational tool is to be an adult self, taking responsibility for your life and navigating as the captain. And then the other wonderful resource internally is your higher self. And that's the part of you that's connected to spirit. And it's a much more objective, higher perspective that your higher self gives you. And that is a wonderful navigation tool when, all hell is breaking loose, or you look around at the news and it seems like everything's falling apart. It's very important to have that navigational tool in your higher self, because that orients you to spirit,
Mm-hmm.
and to what we can be and creatively focusing on in terms of our co-creation capacities. So those three navigational tools, when you can really align them inside yourself, happy inner child, a well-established captain who has agency and decision-making power, and a higher self that can connect you to a much higher perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And those are simply, those three tools can help anybody navigate through these times.
So how do you heal the inner child? Because there's a lot of talk way back when there was a lot of talk about the inner child, and that seems to have gone out the window, and now we're doing something else. Mm-hmm. It's always a new kind of way of being in therapy and healing and whatever, but it's really basic. So if the adult self isn't very strong,
mm-hmm.
and the inner child is much stronger and it's taking over, how do you become that good mother, that good father that our inner child's aching for?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think it's still very relevant psychologically for people. Mm-hmm. Well, what I like to do when I do inner work with a lot of people is to first help us look at all the conditioning, all the expectations, all the shoulds, all the oughts, that our inner child is under that pressure all the time if it's still wounded, right? It's still living under the expectations. And so what I invite people to do is just look at all the conditioning that they took on as a child. What were you expected to do? Do you have an inner critic in there that is kind of, squishing down the inner child? And the replacement for that is a loving presence inside. I call it the good mother. You could call it the good parent. But inviting in a loving presence and visualizing the loving presence being with your inner child, and then healing whatever needs to be healed, taking off the conditioning, allowing your inner child to just be free and be itself. Because every one of us was born with this joyful, creative inner child, and we need to get back to that. So helping the inner child to feel safe and to feel loved with this good parent is a wonderful way to start. Because then you can, if you're the captain of your ship, you can just say to the inner child and good mother, hey, go play, go be safe. I'm the captain. I'm going to show up in my life and be the adult. I'm going to make the decisions from here. And so, to have a loving presence inside is the first step to healing the inner child.
Calling on compassion, I think, is what you're talking about, and kindness. And it's so many of us have a very strong critical voice.
Yeah,
it isn't about kindness and compassion. It's about whipping us into shape so we be good enough for the world and for everybody else and for the expectations that have been put on us.
Yeah.
How do you work with that critical voice that doesn't necessarily want to love the inner child? I know you need a lot of therapy for that sometimes.
Well, actually, anyone can do it with, I call it the alchemy of truth. So when you're really connecting with your adult self, your captain, it begins an alchemy of truth. And you can use that alchemy to dissolve any critical voices inside, because those critical voices are just negative thought forms. And this is really important for people to know, that we've internalized it, maybe from our own parents, but we've also internalized it from the culture, from the soup that we live in. Mm. And if you think about that as negative thought forms that we have swallowed in, or negative viruses that we've taken in, and really they don't need to be there. And this is really important for people to know, that if a virus comes in, a virus can be taken out. And so with the compassionate inner parent, but also with the compassionate higher self,
right,
bringing that compassion to dissolve like an alchemy that just dissolves these inner critics, these negative voices. It absolutely can be done. I've done it myself, and that's why I always encourage people, get your alchemy going. The alchemy can come from the higher self. The alchemy can come from the true self. And begin it now to dissolve those voices, because we don't need to live with those. In fact, we're not supposed to be living with those. Mm-hmm. We're supposed to be living with joy and freedom inside.
Well, I love the idea of looking at them as a thought form, because thought forms actually have an energy.
That's right.
And they can attach to us, and they can be internalized, and they can come from what we call in the internal family systems legacy burdens, the energetic patterns that are passed down. And there's so much now with epigenetics, and we're coming to realize that all these things can be passed down. But to look at them as thought forms, it's like it's not about me. It's about this thing that got attached to me, or things that, when we're children, we're so like a sponge, and right, all this stuff comes in.
Mm-hmm. And I always think of unprocessed thought forms that tumble down the generations as a snowball that starts way back when. And as it tumbles down the generations, it gets bigger and bigger as it comes down the hill. So some of us are landed with this big, huge snowball of unprocessed stuff from our family lineage, from the culture. And so many of us are doing big work to clear these unprocessed thought forms. But we can do it with the alchemy of the higher self. When we bring in the help from our spirit guides, help from our higher self, that resonance will literally dissolve the lower resonances of these thought forms.
I love the word alchemy. Yeah. It's like, I was talking to a friend of mine this morning. I said, "Oh, you're such an alchemist." It's like this idea of being in the lab and working things out, and that word is takes it to a whole different level, as opposed to, well, just get rid of it.
No, we That's right, because we're energetic beings.
Yeah.
And I keep telling people, when you get to the captain, when you get to your adult self, it literally starts an alchemy. It can be a fire alchemy, a water alchemy, an air alchemy, an earth alchemy. It doesn't matter. We can, because we're energetic beings, we can say, you know what? I'm going to turn on my fire alchemy and I'm going to dissolve or I'm going to burn that away. And then you can actually do rituals externally, writing down on a piece of paper all those negative thought forms that you want to let go. And then you can literally burn them in your fireplace and watch the fire and the smoke take them to spirit. That's why I love rituals, because you actually use the elements and you can watch the magic happen.
Love it. So we're going to take a break. And we are back on the Café of Delights. I'm your host, Gale West, and I have with me Reverend Dr. Megan Wagner. We've been having so much fun talking about alchemy and inner child work and our various selves and the Aquarius, the Age of Aquarius, and all the other kinds of things. So I'd like to come back to this idea of using the elements for healing and for transforming. So you were talking about using the fire element. Mm-hmm. Are there other ideas that you have around the different elements? I love the idea of using the element of fire because it's very transformative.
It is. Each of the elements is tremendously transformative when you know how to use the elements. So, for example, I do a lot of grief rituals, which uses the element of water. I mean, we drum and we do all kinds of things to help people release. But the whole point of a grief ritual is to use the water element to take the tears and the stuck water that's inside the body and to help people to release their emotions. And it's a powerful ritual. We set it up, with a village and a shrine where people go up to the shrine and they release their grief. And we're drumming and we're singing and people are moving and dancing and then releasing. And when I first did my first grief ritual, I was absolutely astounded at the sound that came out, at the tears, moving, watery, stuck emotions out of my body. And I was absolutely convinced after that first grief ritual that this was the way I wanted to work with people, because talking therapy is great so far, but it only takes people so far. Mm-hmm. And ritual can really help to unstick emotions and things that get stuck inside the body and the cells. So grief ritual would be an example of using water. You can also use earth. Simply going out into a forest or walking with your bare feet on the earth, sitting with your base chakra on the earth, hugging a tree, being in a circle of trees and meditating. Because many people aren't fully embodied in their body. Mm-hmm. And with a lot of the chaos going on, people are kind of jumping out of their bodies, or they're dissociating, or they're in denial, or. And so using ritual to get in the body is very important. You also use air, and air is the element of movement and change. And so using air as an alchemy to stir up the air or to open up one's consciousness to the stars so that you get these new ideas coming into your system, breathing new life, inspiring new life inside the body. So you can use all the elements for ritual, or you can use them simply internally. Mm-hmm. But I like doing the magic externally. I like meeting with groups of people and doing ritual that way.
I love magic. It's so much fun.
It is.
So this conversation has been really magical. Mm-hmm. And how we're going to come back to it in a minute, but I want people to, I bet they're really curious about you and how to get a hold of you and some of the stuff that you're doing. So I know we talked about how you're leading a group to Thailand. I'm not sure what you're going to do there, but I love Thailand. We're leading a group in January, which I'm on, to Damanhur in Italy. That's very exciting. And so how do people connect with you when you travel? What are some of the things that you do? Is it ritual? Is it magic? Is it all of the above?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I usually have a theme. So in Thailand, it's a women's group, and the theme is the Queen of Compassion. So we're going to be pampering ourselves, of course, in Thailand. We're also going to be opening our hearts to invite in more and more compassion, to be deeply compassionate with self and with the world. So that theme is compassion. When we go to Damanhur, which is a spiritual community, we're going to open all of our senses to awaken our deeper spiritual levels. So every place I travel, I usually have a theme. Excuse me. And like I always take women's groups to Crete because we do the priestess tradition on Crete and open up the priestess path for women to be empowered and embodied and to trust their spiritual knowing. So I travel to places that I've been and I have a very strong connection. And also it feels like there are power places around the world. So the other thing I do is I create shamanic robes, as you've seen, Gale, and I allow people to get into these robes to do ritual, meditation, and personal and planetary healing. So if people want to see my robes, they can go to meganwagner.com and look at the sacred robes to just look at the shamanic figures on the robes, because they are spiritual elders that are helping us to awaken at this time. And they're here to give us information, to give us healing. So I do travel with my robes all around the world, and they've been in stone circles, temples. I mean, they've been Thailand, Bali, West Africa, Mexico, all over Europe, Japan, South Africa. They've been traveling with me. And so they're charged up so that they can do the personal and planetary healing that they were meant to do.
Mm-hmm. That brings me, you've talked a lot about working with women. And it feels to me that part of what we need to do planetarily to reintegrate the divine masculine, divine feminine. And what is yours? A lot of people have an idea of what that is. What is your idea of the divine feminine, divine masculine coming together to that sacred, what I would think you would call the sacred marriage, sacred union?
Yes, I'm very, very interested in the sacred marriage because for me, it's an internal thing that we do internally first.
Yeah.
Once we've achieved a level of the sacred marriage inside, we can then bring that out and have sacred marriage with everybody we meet and to have communion with people, the planet, animals, plants, the cosmos. So for me, the internal sacred marriage is about holding a container that is big enough for our divine self and all the parts of our personality integrating together. The yin and the yang, the masculine, the feminine, the soul and Luna, according to alchemy. And it's really about energetically synthesizing all the opposites within. And it doesn't mean melding all the personalities together. It means, to me, holding a container that has every part of myself together in love and acceptance. Because I really believe that we all choose a team of inner personalities that is going to best serve our particular mission this lifetime. And as we coordinate and unify our inner team with love, everyone seems to get on board and they're on board with the mission this lifetime. And that takes this energetic synthesis of opposites inside. And when that happens, when a person experiences inner sacred marriage, they have an experience of unified consciousness inside, where there's a feeling of peace, inner contentment, love, unified love. And as we then radiate that out to the world, it vibrates out the sacred marriage out to the world. And, a lot of people focus on finding a partner they can do that with. And that's all good. It's just that you can't really find a partner to do that with until you've done the inner work yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So I always just encourage people to do the inner work so that you feel that sense of happiness and love and joy that we're meant to feel. Because to me, the sacred marriage equals unitive states of consciousness inside and a feeling of love and well-being.
So I know you have some meditations on your website.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about them? And your website's meganwagner.com, right? And people can sign up for whatever. Just tell us a little bit more of what you have to offer.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I have several online training programs. I do Tree of Life every year, and that is really working through the 7 stages of initiation on the Kabbalistic Tree of Life. You don't have to know Kabbalah at all. It's really just to really come into right relationship to your true self and your mission. So it's to help people figure out what their mission is and then live their best life according to their mission.
Mm-hmm.
I also do a divine feminine initiation path every year for women. It's called the Feminine Path of Power. And we look at 5 different archetypes: the wise woman, warrioress, queen, visionary, and manifester. And so that's a whole training program on how to embody these 5 archetypes so that women can feel at home in their deepest divine self. I also do a ritual training. So people who want to learn how to hold ritual space for others, either personally and in groups, I have a training program for that. And I do have a lot of sacred travel coming up. So definitely email me about that. And then I have a lot of free meditations. I have like 120 free meditations for people. And those are all around the ascension process. Mm-hmm. So we go through the 7 chakras, meditations on how to connect with the higher self, how to clear trauma. There are so many different subjects. And I do really encourage people to take advantage of that. There's also a free meditation called the Light Grid. And this Light Grid is very connected to all the sacred robes. I have 33 sacred robes, and they all fit on the Light Grid of the Tree of Life. And so if people want to build an internal structure of the inner temple, that is a wonderful way to begin. So it's called the Light Grid, and it's free on my website.
Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, a lot of people bandy this word, the ascension process. And what is your definition of the ascension? Because everyone has a whole different. Some people think that we're going to rise above, and the rest of them are going to be here, and we're going to be there, and they're not going to see the light. That whole kind of thing. Yeah, I don't necessarily believe, but
yeah. Yeah, it's really a misnomer, I think. I think actually it should be descension, because to me, ascension means that we're going to fully embody in every cell our multidimensional being. And the window of ascension, meaning that there's a window of new consciousness coming onto the earth, because the earth itself is awakening, and all the power spots around the earth are awakening. And when the body of the earth fully awakens, the body of the human can fully awaken. So we are intimately connected to the awakening of the power spots on planet Earth. So the ascension for me is the ability to fully be present as a divine, spiritual, psychological, and human physical self all at the same time. So it's not ascending out of the body, it's really being fully in the body and awakened to our divine consciousness fully.
So you're not thinking that we're going to be off on a different planet, and there's going to be 2 planets, the lower people and the higher people. I
don't, because I know that the ascension or the awakening of humanity means every soul.
Yeah.
And not just humans, all the plants, all the animals. We are all ascending, which simply means that we're understanding and remembering who we really are as divine beings. Mm-hmm. And that does need to happen as we're co-creating this new world together, because if you look around at the negative thought forms happening in the world, that is not what we want to be paying attention to. We want to be paying attention to the love and the compassion and the Aquarian ideal of collaboration. These are the things that we can dwell on to create the new world together.
And honestly, if you look around, you'll see it. It's everywhere. And that's the thing that I have a difficult time with is people go, oh, everything's going to chaos, it's blah, blah, blah. But there's lots and lots and lots of shifts. If you just shift over and look your attention. So it's kind of like if buying a car, you buy the car and then you realize that all these other same cars that you think were not out there. But if you look, you choose to look for the evidence that things are shifting, that there is more collaboration. So I'm curious about your idea of, I was just at a meeting and they were talking about working with children, and there's some children are non-binary, and the idea that that gender now with the young people is feeling so fluid. Is that something that is happening, part of that too, where fluidity, there's a fluidity about so many things?
Yeah, it feels to me like there's souls that are coming in with different consciousness.
Yeah.
That as adults that are lovingly raising this next generation, and I have one of them, my son is very gender fluid. And so it's been a journey for me to hold space for souls that are coming in that are doing different work than we are. I think our generation did a lot of therapy work, and that I don't think the next generation is going to have to do. I think we just need to hold space and really lovingly figure out how to hold containers and space for the new souls coming in, because they're here to teach us how to be more unified.
Right.
And so we need to listen to these beautiful souls coming in who are telling us what is wrong with the kind of paradigms that we've set up. Because sometimes we're so in the paradigm, we don't see the new paradigm that's coming. So the new souls coming are showing us that there are many other paradigms that we can follow. Communal paradigms. Dom and Her is one of them. They're an incredible spiritual community of 600 plus people who are living in community because they have a spiritual focus. And they've been an inspiration to me as I hold my spiritual school here in California, that together we can hold a lens that is going to help awaken the planet and humanity much more quickly than if we're doing it ourselves.
Right, right. Well, in the Baha'i writings, they talk about this time that we are the children of the half-light.
Interesting.
But there is this light that's happening, but because it's not fully here, and the shift is happening, but we're in that half-light place. So, I mean, looking at it from that perspective says, well, this new generation is part of that new light, that new light form.
Yep.
And I find it interesting when we talk about male and female, that a lot of the children that are coming in don't have this sense of male as strong and female is really strong, but there's this sense of fluid and I think that gives us an opportunity to do more of this internal energetic synthesis. Right.
And really what we're doing is we're awakening to our divine self while we're in the body. And when you awaken to the fact that each one of us is a vast divine being with these magical spiritual powers, and we have just been so dumbed down by our conditioning, I'm just ready to liberate and throw all of that off so that we can experience the divine in the body right now with this love and well-being and consciousness. And that is what I choose to focus every moment of my life on. That is what I'm here to do, is to liberate people from that conditioning and to really open to this divine love, because then the magic starts to happen. We start to realize that there's magical synchronicities all the time.
It's so exciting.
It is.
We live in this amazing, exciting time.
We do.
And, they say the curse of the Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times. Honestly, I think it's more like, may you live in exciting times. May you live in transformational times. May you live in times that are where we're seeing things. And I'm not going to be able to see, because I'm older, I'm not going to be able to see all of that, but I can see the glimpses of it. That can be part of the shift that can happen.
And I really believe that when we own that we chose to come at this time, which is not only a time of transition between the Piscean and Aquarian, because every change of big cycles, zodiac cycles, is hugely chaotic, but we're also at the end of that 26,000 year cycle. Mm-hmm. So every one of us who chose to come at this time, we came because we knew that the chaos meant a maximum possibility for a new coherence, a new evolutionary cycle. So if we can own that that's why we're here, it's going to be much easier to focus on this new world that we are creating together. I don't even focus on the chaos anymore because it's not what I'm interested in. And so when I've owned absolutely that I came for this time, it gives me a lot more encouragement, a lot more inspiration, a lot more energy to keep going.
Yeah. Well, looking at it from that perspective, you can say, if I came at this time, what is mine to do?
Exactly.
And how am I going to support the shift?
That's right.
And as Gandhi says, be the change that you want to see.
Yeah, it's so true. That's what we're here to do. If we focus on that, we focus on the internal sacred marriage, we focus on loving ourselves profoundly, loving everybody we meet profoundly, it really will change the world. It is changing the world as we do that.
Yeah. And again, as I said before, if you look around, you will see evidences of everywhere.
Yep. And when I look around and I do see the darkness, I simply focus on sending light and love and consciousness to all beings, especially those that need extra light right now in the world.
Well, we have just a few minutes left. Is there anything else that you would like to share with us before we end?
My wish, yeah. Well, my wish, my intention is for all humans to wake up to their divine self, and to see and feel and experience that we're all connected, and in doing so, really profoundly shift consciousness to more love and more light and more joy in living together in this time.
Thank you. So this is a Café of Delights. We meet every second and fourth Thursday at 10 a.m. And the next Thursday is going to be Thanksgiving. And we're going to do a replay of my very, very, very first show, which is Jonathan Salt talking about a new reality in his book. And this talks about how we are in this epic, this shifting, and from epic A, which is win-lose, take things at all costs, to this new paradigm, which is win-win, and what we've just been talking about. And I just thank you so much, Megan, for the work you do and for being a light in the world and for being on the show.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for tuning in to Café of Delights, conversations that enlighten and inspire with me, your host, Gale West. Listen or watch live every second and fourth Thursday at 10 a.m. Pacific on transformationtalkradio.com for a series of riveting interviews from those who are actively working at the edges of local, regional, and global transformation. From science to spirituality, culture, arts, and new economies, and more, we will explore how to create a world where all can thrive. For more information on hope for a new reality, visit me, Gale West, at successwithsoul.com.